Croeso. Welcome to Leeway Productions podcast 10-Minute Musicals, the podcast series all about artist collaboration and Welsh musical theatre. I am Angharad Lee.
And I am Luke Hereford. Now, Angharad, last time we spoke, I teased at the possibility of our listeners hearing some of your very own musical stylings from your days as a musical theatre performer. So what have you prepared for us today?
Well, because I'd read this script beforehand, I'm going to turn this on its head, Luke.
Oh, dear.
I'm going to sing little excerpts of the material I used to sing when I was a young pup, and you have to guess the show and the title of the song.
Okay. Great.
Are we ready?
Yes, I was born.
Tiny excerpts. Ready? I am so sorry about last night.
Vanilla Ice Cream from She Loves Me.
Ooh, well done. Okay. I don't iron his shirts.
Nah, flawed. Dunno.
Oh,
Yeah.
come on, you can do this.
Is it He's Good to Me?
No, 50%.
50%. Yes, 50%. From I don't know.
The Ballroom.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, this is an easy one. Tall and slender.
The girl from the boy from. Oh, yeah. It doesn't finish though, does it? The title. It's the boy from ...
What's it from?
It's from the Mad Show. Actually.
Well done. And this was my go-to song. This is the last one. I will try to make you happy.
I feel like that's the most obvious one, and I don't know what it is.
Gifts of Love from the Baker's Wife.
Oh, I love the Baker's Wife.
Oh, that was a nice little quiz. I enjoyed that.
I thought you were going to get all embarrassed. That's unfortunate, isn't it? Well done. Lovely. So today on our Leeway Productions podcast, we're going to be chewing the fat with 2/3 of the team who wrote Beautiful. Beautiful is a 10-minute musical which was created as part of the very first round of the 10-minute musicals initiative back in 2016 at the Other Room in Cardiff. Beautiful was written by Nicola Reynolds, Patrick Steed and Chris Young. And in a few moments, we will be welcoming Patrick and Chris to tell us about their 10-minute musicals experience. But before we do that, why don't we talk a little bit about how 10-minute musicals has changed since that first project 4 years ago, Angharad?
Oh gosh, how has it changed? I think the biggest thing to remind ourselves is we've supported over 140 artists so far over the past 3 years, which is a huge amount of people and a huge amount of partnerships which have been forged. And a lot of those partnerships have gone on to do things way beyond Leeway. So that's really encouraging and what the whole project is about, I guess. But we've started to take it into the regions. So that's a big drive for us, although, you know, it came to an abrupt halt back in March this year, yes. But we will be picking that back up so we can engage with artists which are embedded a lot more within their communities and find those people who would like to try and write for musical theatre. And also it's much more of a CPD project now. So it's that professional development so that you can dip into a project like this at whatever stage you're at in your career. It's not only for early career artists, because, you know, we can become quite stale, I think, as artists. Not stale, that's the wrong terminology, but we can get stuck in our ways, you know.
That's exactly what I was going to say, stuck in our ways.
Yeah, so, you know, I would really encourage anybody to, and Peter Cox is a perfect example, you know. Peter's been around for years and has a wealth of experience, but marrying him up with somebody like Matt Holmquist just gave a new lease of life to Peter's methodologies. So, you know, those relationships are really important.
And I think that's kind of what it's all about. And what it's always been all about, isn't it? And you talked a lot in our very early episodes and in that intro episode we did, which feels like years ago now that we filmed that, about how there isn't necessarily an outcome. And it is all about those working relationships, which I think is a good sort of segue into introducing our guests, Patrick Steed and Chris Young. How are you both today?
Very good. Thank you for inviting us.
Great. So we have Patrick, who wrote the music for Beautiful. Is that right? Yeah. And Chris, what was your role on Beautiful?
Me? Sorry. I was I suppose you could say producer. So we kind of, because Patrick kind of came up with the musical content. Nicola sort of spearheaded the lyrical content, and then we kind of pulled everything together. So we sort of arranged it. So I sort of arranged it and produced it, basically, and did the sound design elements.
Nice.
So
Great.
this is a really interesting partnership. I think we should explore this a little bit more because, in effect, we've got two composers in this relationship. So
Right.
you know, we've got Patrick, which I knew as I'd come across Patrick as a musical theatre composer. If we want to box people, not that we want to do that, but you know, and then Chris, I'd come across. The way I had described him in my head was like a soundscape artist. Again, we have these, but you know, their practices are way beyond that, and they will explain it much better than I. So I wanted to. It was that marriage I was really interested in. So I don't know whether, Chris, can you kind of explain what your practice is?
Yeah. Well, generally, it does fall in the sort of theatre game. Anyway, it does fall into sound designer, I suppose, is the box, but I tend to compose or create sound or music from found sounds and a lot of live manipulation of that sound. Usually doing things using a software called Ableton. I usually perform with the companies quite often live, so that all of the sound is almost DJ'd live rather than just sort of cueing it. Yeah, and like I say, I do a lot of sound manipulation and things like that. So we take sounds that have been field recordings that have been recorded in sessions or in development of shows, and then I'll usually take them and sample them and start reworking them into musical content for whatever the show is. And for the 10-minute musicals things, it was a new angle for me, because I'd always had a little thing in the back of my head that said I wanted to try and write a musical or something like that. And so yeah, this was a nice opportunity to try to bring all of that weird music concrete sort of ethic into making a musical. It was quite nice.
And Patrick, what about yourself? How would you describe your background as a again, not to box, but as a musical theatre composer?
Yeah, so I wrote a musical back in 2013 called Stalking John Barrowman, and I dabbled in other kind of musical theatre projects since then. I also did a course in London called Book Music and Lyrics that's very much follows the formula of, you know, this is how musicals work and this is how you write them, this is the format. And it was a really exciting journey getting involved with 10-minute musicals and working with Chris, because I was definitely in a box of, this is the way it works, this is like my safety zone, you know, these are the rules that I follow to get a certain outcome. And I think I remember having a chat with you, Angharad, on the Monday. It was a week-long project. And you kind of just encouraged, like, I know you've got all these like ways of doing it, but just kind of let it all go for this week and follow this kind of journey, to kind of see what else you can kind of get from it. And I think that was part of the reason it was so great working with Chris, because I had like one language that I was used to working with. You know, you have your chords, you have your lyrics, you have your structure, all this kind of stuff. And in working with Chris, because he was so used to recording sounds and creating music from these sounds, it suddenly was like I got this extra like sense. So rather than it just being like, oh yeah, this chord's going to be like A minor and whatever, it was suddenly like, what if this chord was A minor and it was the sound of glass, or the sound of like a blind opening, but in harmony, and all this kind of like this whole world of stuff that I just had never thought in before. So you mentioned at the start that kind of when you collaborate with people with different kind of skills, it can just really open your mind to different things. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me.
I remember that moment, and this is the joy in these projects. Did you have a what was your object? You had a bird, did you, Patrick? A flamingo. And I remember you something happened, clicked, and you were inspired, and you went and sat by your keyboard. It's like, I got a song. And there's the intervention about, right, hang on now. You know, and so it's that investigation, isn't it? That we're not always thinking about the arc of something. That patterns are really important rather than the arc of something. And I guess, I don't know, the way I would describe the relationship I saw is this pattern of working methodology started to evolve. So I'd really love to, if you could unearth what that pattern was a little bit more. I don't know if you can articulate it, but how did that relationship actually work?
So I'd say that the kind of the process was very, very kind of organic. And I think that if I remember, this is kind of going back to 2016, isn't it? So it's kind of like trying to remember exactly kind of what we did. But I remember that we spent the Monday, I think the Monday was you and Harry just kind of working with all of us to kind of set us on the right kind of path of this journey and open us up to kind of new ways of thinking and bringing all the kind of creativity kind of out. And then from Tuesday, Chris and I then worked with Nicola, who's a writer and an actor and kind of director and lots of kind of strengths. And we worked with a performer, Emma. And I think the four of us at that point kind of just started kind of realizing what our strengths were in different areas and how we kind of, organically started to evolve this story and this idea.
So do you think that during that process, that collaborative process between you, Patrick, you, Chris, Nicola, who isn't here, and also your fourth collaborator, your performer, Emma, who you acknowledged, which I think is great. Do you think in that process you each had specific roles, or but you keep talking about it being organic? So do you think there was kind of, do you know what I mean? Do you think there were barriers or boxes within your roles, or were you very much each sharing it equally?
I think we had blurred boundaries, blurred boxes.
Yeah.
We were quite happy to leave each other to do specific elements of it, but at the same time, nobody was against sort of going, oh, actually, let's do this, or let's try that, or try this line, or try that chord, or whatever. Because a lot of the music and I think the sort of sung parts, the sung lyrics anyway, were basically between Emma and Patrick, kind of working at the keyboard and things like that. And then Nicola was sort of working on the monologue side of things. But then she'd be sort of thinking about what they were doing, and then she might kind of try to incorporate a bit of that, and then we might all sort of think about or brainstorm what kind of sound illustrates particular things. And so there was, everybody was utilizing their own skill, but at the same time, there was no obligation to only stay in your little field.
It sounds like you were definitely feeding each other in that time period, which is really nice to hear. And as we keep saying, it's sort of what it's all about, isn't it? 10-minute musicals as an initiative.
And also interesting, I think, Patrick, did you write the lyrics and Nick wrote the monologue?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, if I think that far, I think.
Yeah. So again, it's just, going back to the old school kind of book musical. I mean, that would be the standard mode of practice, wouldn't it? A lyric writer compared to the book writer, they're worlds apart. But I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just interesting how you define those roles.
Mm-hmm. I think Yeah, we did kind of have those roles, but as Chris said, it was all kind of very, very blurred. So like, if I think of something that I thought was quite magical about the collaboration, particularly between Nicola and Chris, was there would be these kind of monologue sequences, but Chris would write this kind of almost underscoring that used sounds that reflected words from the monologue. And it was all, you'll know more about this than I would, Chris, because it just seems like wizardry. I don't know how you do it. But just, you were doing it live, but there was stop and start things at different times?
Yeah, so some things were pre-recorded, and then some things we could trigger things at specific points, because the full live version, there was a little bit more, wasn't there? There was an extra sort of 2 or 3 minutes, I think, and then we had the song. So for the initial kind of monologue at the beginning of the live version, I was sort of triggering things live or mixing things live, and then we triggered the backing track for the actual song cue. But yeah, it's as I say, it's all about using controllers and things like that, and MIDI controllers, and triggering things live, basically mixing sounds and manipulating the sounds and sampling. Everything I sampled for that piece was specifically for that piece, if you get what I mean. So even the sort of the kind of stringish instrument that's doing the chord progressions in the song is made out of Emma's voice and things like that, and manipulated so that it sounded quite haunting and quite weird.
This is really interesting to hear, as I think with the idea of 10-minute musicals and it being a project where people come and write a musical, some of our listeners would, sorry, I don't know how to phrase this properly, possibly think, oh, I can't write a musical because I've never done that before. I'm not a composer. But absolutely, your background, Chris, is not that of a traditional musical theatre composer. So it's really nice to hear how you found your way into that.
Yeah, it was
inspiring for
it was a bit of a fluke. But no, as I say, it's always been something that I've loved, and I've loved the people that have just done just purely audio rock opera, like the War of the Worlds rock opera and things like this, and concept albums. I think they've always been things that really interest me in music, and so with 10-minute musicals, it was kind of the opposite of what Patrick was saying, that you have a specific kind of skill set. But I didn't really know, if somebody said write a song for a musical, I didn't really know how to do that. As in, like, how do you make it sound like a musical? How do you give it a narrative, and how do you lyrically kind of do a whole arch or something like that in a story?
Isn't it so exciting that we're questioning what does a musical sound like, and how do you start writing a musical? It's a really exciting time.
Yeah, that's another podcast, Luke.
Yeah, exactly. I guess just a very quick question. So again, thinking about those listeners who might be thinking about composing or writing but don't really know where to start, do either of you as individual artists, I guess both as composers in your own right, have any rituals or kind of any first steps that you take anytime you start writing?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I do have some usual kind of steps that I go through. I was so conscious when I did the 10 Minutes project to kind of go into a completely different space, that I was trying to almost not do any of the rituals that I normally do, so that I would get the full kind of benefit from it. But I'm quite, even though I'm a really creative kind of person, I've got into a head of like kind of clarity and structure with creating something. So a little rule that I kind of have when I'm writing a song is at the top of, like, once I've kind of like mulled it over and kind of started thinking about what it is and all that kind of thing, I will write at the top, this song is called ... and it's about ... and it's just a one sentence at the top of my line, because there's something in the title of a song that, particularly musical theatre, will keep kind of coming back. I think it comes back more often maybe than pop music, or it comes back in different ways. So having kind of clarity on what it's called will shape the song. And then I think it's really easy to like lose what a song is about. You get so wrapped up in creating it that, you know, and sometimes what it's about is different from the title as well. So you could say this song is called I'm Falling in Love, and it's about loss. So it doesn't need to match the title, but if you've got those two clear things, I think that's something that I kind of will help navigate my way, I think, around writing a song.
And this ties in with, you know, directorially what you do is you find your fundamental statement, because a musical can be so vast at times. You have to have that one statement or question that you're trying to, not even trying to answer, but you're acknowledging throughout it, you know, because that keeps you in check as a director and it keeps your whole team in check. So it's the same dramaturgical skill set that you're using, which is great.
Yeah, that specificity is really interesting, Patrick. I don't know if you've ever heard Stephen Sondheim talk about when he says, I could never write, if somebody said write a love song, I could never do that. But if you told me to write a song sung by a woman in a bar wearing a green dress, she's just missed the last subway home, I can do it. And I think that's really interesting that as an artist, you think, okay, the more specific I can be, the clearer my journey is, and like how I can get there is much clearer.
And again, this all ties in with how you work with actors, because you try and get your actors away from generalized thoughts. You know, you're looking at your given circumstances, you're looking at your Stanislavskian techniques, you know, and so it all ties in quite organically. It's just that we use different language to approach it.
What about yourself, Chris? Oh, sorry, Patrick, go on.
I was thinking it's interesting hearing the your thoughts as like a director and dramaturg, and how it kind of all ties in, because it's all involved with creating the piece, isn't it? And making sure that the audience feel the right things at the right time and can respond to it.
We're just acknowledging that everything is relevant, basically. Which it is. Any rituals that you have, Chris, as quite a different kind of composer?
It changes a lot. But I think the general thing that I start to do is it's a bit of a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, and then start peeling everything back off again. I'll usually spend quite a lot of time throwing loads and loads of ideas into a song until I get to a point where I've hit a wall, and I've usually hit a wall because I've gotten to that point where I've lost what I was initially trying to do. Then that's the point where I take everything off it again and go right back to the start. But from doing that, I seem to have an idea of what I want or what I don't want.
Yeah, but I guess you know what remains, what sticks, is what is right for that moment, isn't it? Which is great.
Yeah, and it tends to be, I have a lot of scraps of ideas. I have loads of scraps of ideas that eventually I might have scraps of lyrics and a scrap of a chord progression or something like that. And they might be years old, half of these things, but they'll suddenly meld into something that makes sense together. And every now and again, there'll be a tune that sort of falls into your lap, but it doesn't happen very often, I don't find. But I've been quite enjoying particularly during lockdown. I've been doing a lot of research into just the history of music and the development of music, and obviously it all goes into musicals and the development of musicals and things like that. And that's given me a lot more inspiration on how to kind of tackle things to musically make things a bit more interesting. So it tends to kind of change and flex a little bit my initial process for making things. Because if I get bored of something, then I'll try and learn something new and do a new idea, do a new method.
Yeah, but I'd be fascinated in you know, having a week where your practice completely leads the way on the creation of a piece. I'd be really interested to see how, especially, you know, we're looking a lot at VR at the moment, aren't we? You know, everything's virtual reality, and it feels like your practice fits really nicely with that, but it feels also feels a bit obvious. So, you know, allowing your practice to lead us would be really interesting moving forward. What that would look like and feel like and sound like, I don't know, but because we explore narrative differently then, don't we?
Mm.
The narrative is a much more visceral experience rather than trying to load it with meaning we think people want to hear.
Yeah, that could be an interesting route to go down, because I do quite like, even though stage is still a sort of an important part, but yeah, I've been really interested in the idea of like writing a musical that was completely in the dark in surround sound or something, and so the sound is just leading you in different directions, and theme and things like motifs and leitmotifs and all of that. Like, could they be just a sound rather than? Well, I suppose a lot of time they are. That, as I say, when I was looking at film music and things like that, it has been going a bit more in that direction anyway, where it becomes more about a motif or a theme for somebody might be more just about a feeling rather than a chord progression. Like, there's a nice one with the Dark Knight, the Chris Nolan Dark Knight, with there's an interesting thing with the strings that he uses to portray the Joker, because he's such an intense, crazy kind of character. He just has a sound to portray him. He doesn't really have a theme tune. He just has this, he had like an entire orchestra basically running razor blades down their violin strings and just creating this ridiculously intense sound. And that was it for the Joker. You know, so I quite like that idea of, moods and feel and textures becoming motifs and leitmotifs.
Okay, so this is a nice opportunity, I think, to share the video that we've created with you. So this was a little collaboration we had with the MAMT students at Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama. And just to remind you that, you know, we were in lockdown. And we worked with Joe Hood, who was a arranger and kind of music producer on it. So I don't think you've seen this before, have you?
No, this is so exciting. Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, so we'll just share the video.
You are beautiful. I know you're beautiful. You said we would be beautiful on the inside. When did we change? It happened so slowly, insidiously, this grey cloud looming around us until the red mist ascended and you changed, smashed the dreams into a million tiny pieces on that floor, and I take it, make it better again. Do you remember the time when everything had a glow? When we lived in our own perfect world? We'd look at one another for hours, tell me I love you with your eyes. The sun was always shining. At least that's how I remember it. It's never ending with those memories. I was happy then. Will we be happy again? Sometimes I sit in my silent world and dream that I fly away. I can't do better, I must do better. Telling why is it I always stay? You will see I'm not a waste of space. I will show you all, and when I do, I know I'll with the endless chances, the broken trust, I'll find a perfect future if I can just walk through that door. Out of the darkness, away from the red mist, and the world will be mine. I'll be free. Free in an endless place of colour and possibility, where I'm not frightened or trapped. With this coat, are we golden? You were my golden boy. What happened to you? What happened to us? 'Cause we were beautiful. We were beautiful. It's not beautiful anymore for me. I am beautiful.
Wowzers!
Haha, what a great first response.
Oh, she's amazing, isn't she, Alan?
She's incredible.
Oh my word.
And we gave her such a challenging task there to hold that screen for, how long was that, 4 minutes?
Yeah,
A static shot there, so she did so well with it. It's such a great
really
piece.
good.
It's always just so exciting, isn't it, when you've kind of like, you've written something, created something, to then see it being kind of performed. It just kind of breathes just this extra kind of life and new energy into a piece. It's
And
wonderful.
it really holds its own as a song, because I've got to remind our listeners, you know, these are condensed versions of our 10-minute musicals. So you've done a great job into kind of trying to harness it. And, you know, there's a beautiful song there for somebody to use, you know, you've done a great job. Lovely.
I don't actually think, what I think is really useful about this sort of sort of side project, this sort of condensed 10-minute musicals, is that I don't think I've ever seen Beautiful in its entirety. So, and that was just like a little teaser, and that made me think, oh, I want to see the whole thing, which is really interesting. That they kind of these play like a new role as a teaser for your full version.
And it's been so interesting to kind of like evolve it as well, because it's, you know, we last kind of left the project in, you know, 2016, and suddenly it's 2020, and all these kind of questions of, you know, everything that's happened in the world since then, you know, how our minds, you know, what we're putting into it now. I know, Angharad, you kind of mentioned like the whole coronavirus thing and how that impacts kind of people, you know, being trapped in relationships, and we're reflecting on that. And also I think it's interesting, when we were looking at creating just a shorter version for this project, you kind of go, what parts of this are really essential? What parts can we kind of let go for now? And, you know, if it was to be a 10-minute musical, which bits will we get back, or which bits will we take further?
Absolutely. It's a really good exercise as well and I know you've done this, Patrick, because both you and I were supposed to be at Beam this year, which was obviously cancelled, you know, and, you know, you have to do your 10-minute pitch of a large-scale musical. And I don't know if you've ever done an elevator pitch, which is 1 minute, you know, so these are really good exercises of how do you condense a 2-hour musical into a minute with story and song. You know, that's a regular occurrence in musical theatre, so it's a really good exercise for that, and that it can be done as well.
Yeah, and it was exciting as well to kind of get some fresh ears on the project as well, like working with Joe, who was doing a lot of the kind of musical direct and you know, he might suddenly say like, oh, so why have you gone with this, you know, choice for, and you kind of go, I can't remember really why I went with that. Maybe it's worth exploring something new with it. Because the whole the middle section of that of Beautiful for this project was completely lyrically rewritten, inspired by a stream of consciousness exercise that Ellen did, which moved the piece more further away from being poetic and more towards being real, and I kind of liked that kind of evolution.
So as we're talking about evolution, now is a sort of seamless transition moment into some design responses from theatre designer Corey Shipp, who unfortunately can't be with us on the call today, but has handed over some wonderful design responses for Beautiful. So we're just going to share those with our artists now. So obviously this is slightly uncharted territory because we're looking at design responses from a designer, but we're just kind of interpreting them ourselves really here. So it's a little bit of, we're going in a little blind, but something that Corey often talks about is how with this specific exercise of creating a mood board and initial response from an existing piece that has no plans for production, you can't design for space. So all you can really do is find images and ideas that are evocative to the themes of the piece, which is exactly what she's done with this mood board here. So I'm interested to see, Chris and Patrick, as you both are so, I guess, aware and so connected to the themes in the piece, how these images make you feel.
I think it's quite interesting. I feel like I can hear what parts of the sound might have triggered particular things, because we've got sounds of birds and nature and things in the piece, and sounds of smashing and fragmented things. But I quite like the idea that it potentially meets in the middle with this sort of Romeo and Juliet thing. I quite like the idea of something of it not being modern in a way, that it's this kind of old medieval sort of design with it, but kind of, I don't know, a medieval design with a modern twist, I suppose. I like the image of the figure coming out of the wall. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and drawn immediately to the bowl, you know, the cracks, and just your title as well, Beautiful, and how we identify what beauty is, you know, and especially social media, we don't like to show our cracks, do we, on social media these days, or maybe more so these days actually, which is quite nice. But these cracks are a part of us, a part of our history, and that we should be able to share them in a safe space. That's what I get from this,
I guess.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting just actually how, as a director, from a directorial sense, just seeing a mood board with specific images puts you in so many different, it gives you so many different avenues that you can explore. Like you've already touched on it, Chris, like could it be something more medieval, or you know, you've got this really abstract image of this person coming out of the wall. Is there something more, is there a theatrical representation of that you could explore?
And also, when I see this Romeo and Juliet image, it frustrates me, because we, especially as women, we're almost kind of trained from an early age to seek this perfect relationship, as if that is our end goal in life somehow, as if we are defined by this image of a perfect relationship, you know. And I guess that's what Romeo and Juliet kind of sums up for me, and it's that image kind of encapsulates that, and you know, why we end up in such uncharted territory sometimes as humans, that we're trying to pursue something which is literally unattainable, and we're trained to do that. So that's what that image really evokes in me.
Does that feel like we're in the right ballpark for your musical, Patrick and Chris?
I think so. Like one thing this mood board does really, really well is it feels like it captures kind of what the piece is about. So certain images you're going to go, oh yeah, I see how that. And then there's other ones, you know, like the kind of Romeo and Juliet one that like would not have crossed my mind at all. And then seeing that makes you go, it could move a little bit in that way or a little bit in that way. And having those extra kind of influences to inspire a piece, I think, is just really exciting.
I love that he's the Romeo character. It's almost as if she's going to push him off his pedestal.
He's balancing.
It's like they're wearing masks as well, doesn't it? Which I think is an interesting idea.
I wish Corey was here in a way, because I would be interested to know why she chose that image of Romeo and Juliet. You know, why didn't she go for a Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio? And why did she go for this one? Or, you know, there are other Romeo and Juliets you could have gone for. I just like Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio. For any of our listeners who are joining us through a non-visual medium but are interested in how Corey's design responses look, you can view this podcast episode on YouTube, where the whole episode is also captioned. So Patrick and Chris, before we wrap up today's episode, just want to ask what is in store for each of you.
Ooh, good question. So obviously there's the whole challenges of being in a lockdown, social distance and all that kind of stuff that are kind of going on at the moment. As Angharad mentioned, we're both involved with a event called Beam that's to do with creating new musicals, and I'm working on one at the moment with a writer called Mike Stocks called Cooper's Hill Cheese Rolling and Wake, about the festival in Gloucestershire where they chuck a cheese down a hill and everyone chases it. So working on that at the moment. And yeah, just trying to maintain being a creative person while the whole world has gone into a very different world.
But you also run the technical choir, Patrick, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a choir that is kind of obsessed with musicals as well. So very kind of fitting. We kind of remix musicals with kind of mashups, and we've had to move completely to a virtual kind of spectrum. And I think for quite a while now, because singing is considered quite dangerous at the moment. So it's been interesting to evolve a choir into being a virtual presence. And actually, it's something that even when I'm back to rehearsals in real life, I think I'll continue in some kind of capacity, because I have quite enjoyed the virtual element to it.
What about yourself, Chris? What's next for you?
I'm currently just doing some bits and bobs with a lady called Claire, who's she's a performing artist / clowning artist. She kind of does stuff all over the world, basically. But and we were going to work together before lockdown happened, and then lockdown happened and completely smashed the whole plan that we had. But we found a new way to work together, which will be nice. So I'll be doing some field recording with her, and then creating a soundscape for a performance. And hopefully I was on tour with Louder Is Not Always Clearer, but again, lockdown put a big pause on that. So and hopefully, all being well, we can kind of pick that back up again in December. But it's all dependent on the travel situation, basically, because it's all the international dates that got paused, basically. So we're still waiting to see what happens, but hopefully December we can kind of kick it back off again.
I feel like we're all experts in waiting at the moment.
Absolutely. It's a shared skill that we've all acquired. Well, good luck, each of you, in your future endeavours. And thank you so much for joining us, Patrick Steed and Chris Young, writers of Beautiful, which was also co-written by Nicola Reynolds. Big thank you to Elan Mirion, who performed Beautiful, and to musical director Joe Hood. Thank you also to Corey Shipp, once again, for your beautiful responses to Beautiful.
If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to spread the word on social media, you can use the hashtag Leeway10pod and tag us at Leeway Prods on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook.
And a final thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us today. Tune in next week for more exclusive discussions with alumni of 10-minute musicals. You may even hear a little bit from my own personal repertoire folder. I'm Luke Hereford.
And I am Angharad Lee.